What is going on, guys? It is MurderInc here, back with another champion spotlight video. Today we're going to be talking about the fragment legendary Kreela Witch-Arm. She's an orc support legendary, and there's a lot to talk about here. I'm not going to go over in too much detail how to get her. I did that in a previous video. I shed some of my personal opinions. I strictly want to talk about how this champion can do for you if you choose to invest in this champion. As it stands from the testing that I've personally done with this champion so far, I have found 3 different builds that you can use, ranging from early game to mid game all the way to the end and late game player base. So this champion does give lots of options. Once again, I do want to reiterate the point that this champion does have to be invested in. When I say invested, I do mean fully booking this champion. So let's get into the skills in case you're not familiar with this. The first skill, we just have an A1 here. Places a shield equal to 10% of this champion's health on the lowest ally for 2 turns. It's a single hit ability. This is the interesting one. The A2 attacks one enemy, places a stun on them for 1 turn, and then has an 80% chance, once booked up to 100, of teaming up with 3 random allies to attack a random enemy. Obviously, the allies joining will be using their A1 ability, which moves on to our next point, which is the A3. It's on a 4-turn cooldown. Once booked, places a 50% increase attack, 30% increase crit rate on all allies for 3 turns, and then attacks all enemies. So we have lots of buffs going on, but the main thing to take away from just reading this kit is she is dealing damage in every single skill here. So this is something to consider, especially when I start going over the builds. Now the first thing I want to talk about is the damage check that I will be doing. Everybody knows that I like gearing these champions with the best gear possible. And some people may think it's simply a flex for me to do that, show my best gear. As we can see here, I'm actually not on my account. I'd like to give a huge shout out to Azazel, who built this champion, booked this champion, mastered this champion just so I could do some testing on it. Really appreciate it, so thank you a lot for letting me use your account. Back to my point here, this is not a damage flex. The reason why I do this is to see what the damage potential is, but also figure out which skill is the hardest hitting skill, and you can see the difference much more clearly the more damage you stack. So as we can see here, I have tons of damage in gear. I have Helm Smasher Masteries, which is going to give a Dragon 21 the perfect source of reliable information for me to determine which skill is hitting the hardest, what some of the thresholds are to compare it to previous champions that I've done spotlights on. Now keep in mind that we can't fully commit to how Plarium labels their legendaries. Just because she's a support legendary doesn't necessarily mean she doesn't deal damage, as I've shown with Lissandra in the past, where I can make Lissandra hit extremely hard, and it shocked myself and tons of people when I did release that video. So now what we're going to do is we're going to head straight into Dragon 20. There is a battle on this account, but I'm not going to be using him because I don't want to skew any information giving increased damage where it shouldn't be. As you can see, we have the attack aura since she's an attack based champion, Draco with the defense down and weaken, Whirlwind for the increased crit damage, as well as the attack up from Arbiter to give her that additional speed boost since she is running really slow in this damage gear. Let's give this a shot. Let's take a look at what this champion is about and see what kind of potential she has. So let's hit that defense down and weaken on everybody. Perfect, it landed. Let's just toss this A3 out here, increase that critical damage. Now the first ability we are going to be testing for Kreela Witch-Arm is going to be her A3 ability. This is the A3 that increases attack, crit rate before anything happens, and then she attacks all allies. I worded it that way and emphasized it that way because you wouldn't have to use someone like Arbiter to count on an attack up buff if that was your initial thought process. She is going to self buff herself and every single ally before she does this attack. So let's see how much damage this A3 can do. So we have 136, I saw 128. That was probably the difference between some of the Helm Smasher procs. She definitely does a lot of damage on that A3. Nothing crazy by any means, but the fact that she has such a unique kit with an ally attack, a stun, and being a support champion with that weaker threshold of base crit damage is definitely a good sign going forward. So now let's cycle through this a bit. We have the poisons going down, we have takedown. Let's use some survivability here. Now let's take a look at this A2. We only have weaken on one of the champions, so keep that in mind when I use this A2. Let's see the damage here. So 76. So we have 76 followed by 76 again. I'm not sure if one was a Helm Smasher proc or if one was not. So let's keep going here with that defense down and weaken. It was resisted on the Tyrell, so let's get that weaken on with the Arbiter. Let's toss a hit here. Okay, so Tila isn't going to die. She's going to do reduced damage because I believe she has increased damage based on having full health. So that is another consideration we are going to have going forward here. Now we don't want any surplus damage, so let's just do that. Get the defense down. Can we get a full heal? No, we can't. Let's test this A1 on Apothecary here. So 171,000 with a Helm Smasher proc. Now that's a ton of damage. As it stands and how it appears to me, from my brief testing before and from what I see here so far, the A1 is the hardest hitting ability, followed by the A2, then of course spread to that AoE ability, which is the A3. Usually AoE abilities will always hit or less than a single target ability, just as you could probably imagine is the base model for most kits going on here. We had 121,000 on that A3 hit for the dragon, and we had 131 from the A2, followed by 151 from the A1. So that pretty much confirms what I'm thinking here. Now with that being said, this is actually the first build. Obviously there's going to be some differences in how you specifically gear this champion, but let's talk about the value and the use. A champion like this is going to be used, what seemed to be worrisome for some people when first looking at the initial reaction of this champion is, on auto she is going to use her A3 first. Now that seemed to be a gigantic issue for a lot of people. However, it wasn't the case for me. One major thing and why I claim that is because the ally attack happening in this second wave, well, she's doing so much damage here. This is actually suboptimal. You would want her in speed boots, make her a bit quicker. But my point is here, usually champions are going to use their strongest attacking ability in that first wave of the dungeon. Now you have a champion using an AoE just to give a buffer to buff the whole team with that increased attack, with that increased crit rate. And then in the second wave, she's actually going to be using her ally attack ability, kind of filling that void in pretty much every single speed run, especially if you're not using a reset champion like a Kaimar. So there's a lot to think about there. There's a lot of added benefit with champions who have an AoE A1 ability. So that was the first thing that came to mind when I started thinking about it. So as far as this build goes, what would the ideal use for this build be? This would literally be any dungeon that isn't clashing affinity wise, as well as faction wars. That's how I would build this champion for that type of setting, whether you're early game, mid game, or end game. I think the benefit is mostly to the end game since she has such high damage potential, especially from that A2 and that A1. But as far as early game goes, you can definitely get away with giving this champion something like a stun set, since she does have that AoE and she also applies that stun on the A2 every single time. Giving her another chance to apply a stun on the A1 is also very strong as well. So my recommendation going forward, if you want to use this champion in dungeons or faction wars, focus on damage, make sure she's healthy enough to survive. Don't worry too much about accuracy. The stun is nice, but especially in a isolated environment like dungeons where there's multiple waves, multiple problems for you to deal with, that single target stun isn't going to do a lot, which is why I related this to the stun set that you could use as well as Relentless Gear. Relentless Gear isn't very unique to Kreela Witch-Arm. It's rather unique to ally attack champions. Any champion with the cooldown as strong as an ally attack definitely has increased benefit from Relentless Gear. Now the next build that I want to talk about with Kreela Witch-Arm is of course the clan boss. I'm really excited to talk about this because this is going to probably lead up to some videos once I personally pull this champion, which is going to get me back into the clan boss groove. Not saying that I miss it, I do. But I'm really hyped for this. I think there's a ton of potential here that a lot of people possibly have overlooked. So I did some very simple and quick swaps to this champion. The first thing you have to look at is defense, 3,287. I'm literally wearing 2 cruel sets and 1 speed set with the defensive chest, with an attack banner. with an attack ring, so this is absolutely incredible. As far as mastery goes, I did give her the typical War Master tree. Now what we're going to do is we are going to test a clan boss key. Keep in mind, Valkyrie is geared for the arena, Bad Elf for dungeons, Dracomore for a very specific unkillable clan boss team, so none of this is speed tuned. We're just going to look at it so I can point out a few very key points as to why I'm going to make the claim that Kreela Witch-Arm is actually going to be the best ally attack champion and legendary for the clan boss. So let's start this match off, and I'm not really sure how this is going to play out, so okay, Valkyrie is going to go first, that's fine, she's very quick for arena. Let's toss on these poisons here, defense down and weaken. Let's use the defense up because eventually it will desync. So Kreela didn't get a chance to go, and that's not going to be a huge issue here. So she's hitting for 74,000. She does have War Master on. As we saw from the change that I made, one huge thing for clan boss that a lot of people don't consider is having an ally attacker champion that applies increased attack and increased crit rate can absolutely skyrocket the source of your damage from all of the raw damage on your team. Whether you're using leech, whether you're using lifesteal, the fact that you're getting more consistent crit rate that lasts for 3 turns, even though it's a 4-turn duration, the odds and the uptime of that is absolutely incredible. The other very important thing to keep in mind is Blinding Glow. This ally attack is actually on a 3-turn cooldown once fully booked. Not only that, while it does say teams up with 3 random champions, so it's not quite as strong as a full team ally attack like Longbeard. The key thing that you're going to notice once I hit this ability is that Kreela actually attacks twice. She attacks once there, then she joins it, so it does actually equal out to a total of 5 hits, making this so strong. Now let's throw this on auto, watch the rest of this dungeon as I explain a few more things. So who can we compare this to confirm the claim that she's going to be the best ally attack champion in a clan boss setting? One major factor is that she is competing with Longbeard and Lonicus. If anyone has ever used Lonicus in the clan boss, you know that she boosts the turn meter as well as has a chance to grant an extra turn. These things can not only desync your clan boss team, but it can make it so she's outspeeding the proper buffs and she's going to die very early. On top of that, if you haven't noticed this already, Kreela has extremely high base defense, so while someone like Longbeard provides increased damage by 20% to that entire team, as well as having it being a full team ally attack, his base defense is extremely low, which is a huge crutch, and especially when trying to perform at the top level for the clan boss as far as survivability and sustain goes for this champion. Now you have a champion who has very good defense for this support attack type champion. You can build her with a lot of sustain, a lot of survivability, and the fact that she attacks twice, she can not only proc War Master twice, equaling out the fact that it's only a 4-man ally attack, but her raw damage is actually rather significant. And as mentioned before, the first thing I said when we tested was the most damage comes from her A1, and she is in fact using that A1 in the ally attack. So she gains a ton of value there. It's really hard to compete with. So that pretty much is the reason why I went to the claim of Kreela being the top damage dealer as far as ally attack champion goes for the clan boss. Now this can be said for endgame, this can be said for mid game, this can even be said for early game if you happen to have pulled her during this double sacred event, or if you are in fact a newer player who is going to spend some money and invest in this champion going forward. Alright, so here's the final breakdown of this key. Although this is a team of 5 very strong legendaries, none of them are speed tuned, and as you know, speed tuning is the key to clan boss no matter how you look at it. And Kreela actually pulled out 5.8 million damage. Obviously Valkyrie doesn't have War Master on, which is why I was so excited to see this and come up with this while I've been testing this, so that when I pull this champion I can make some really cool compositions that all players can use in the clan boss regardless of where you are in the game, to make sure that you can use this champion to your advantage if you do decide to use her. I mean, looking at this very quickly just for comparison, 5.8 million damage to 4 million damage from Bad Elf, who is a poisoner, all the way to 4.5 from Alton, who is a very hard-hitting defense-based champion. So now that we have that sorted, let's go over the final build for this evening, which is probably going to be the first build that jumped into everyone's head when they saw this champion. That's going to be the ally attack in arena for some type of blender team. When you're building this, the main things you're going to focus on are speed as fast as possible, accuracy, as much accuracy as possible, since she does have that stun, and that's really where this character is going to shine. The only problem with this champion is she's actually going to use her A3 on auto, so you're going to have to manual and use the A2 unless someone can find an interaction. I did consider what would you have to do to make it so she uses her A2 first, and the fact that there are very specific requirements to use a blender team to bring in other champions just to make this champion's AI work properly isn't ideal, and I say properly only for the fact of arena. As mentioned before, as far as dungeons and clan boss goes, her AI is perfectly fine for a full auto team in those aspects of the game. What makes her really good in a blender, she gets to target a specific champion for the stun with 100% chance. Granted, she has enough accuracy. And the main problem with blender teams as of right now is absolutely going to be teams with a Duchess on them. So every blender team, especially as I'm talking about it, the assumption is that you are always going to go first. You have to assume that with the blender team. If you aren't going first, then you're probably not going to win, and it defeats the purpose of using a blender. Now, the fact that you can go and stun a Duchess, who is always the main problem as mentioned before, and then have this champion hit a second target after that increases the value this has over other champions. One thing that is a disadvantage to her kit is the fact that she does require accuracy, whereas none of the other champions do. So not only do you have to build her for speed, and as much speed as possible to make sure you're not getting speed cut by anyone else in their arena, you have to build her with accuracy to really capitalize on this type of kit. As far as the blender goes, that really explains it for itself. All you really need to know is that interaction with the stun and why it's so strong in a blender team. And as far as masteries, I do have the same original clan boss mastery still on it, but the only thing that would change as far as this champion to other blender champions is you would definitely go for the mastery called Eagle Eye, which gives you increased accuracy, making the accuracy as high as possible to make sure that stun is landing, because it's such a crucial part of her kit. Alright guys, that's it for this champion spotlight video. Hopefully you enjoyed it. Once again, huge shout out to Azazel for letting me use his account and showing you guys what this champion can do based on what I found so far with these 3 builds. As mentioned, really excited to get into clan boss with her, because I think she's definitely going to spice things up for a lot of players who are actively spending and going for this champion. Let me know what you guys think about this champion as a fragment. I know some people were kind of disappointed that it was kind of paywalled behind these big summit events to get the most amount of fragments out of this champion, but let me know what your guys' thoughts are on what I've showed you from our kit today. Were you surprised? Was it everything you expected? Have you found something else that this champion can do that I missed? Definitely leave a comment below. Let me know. Don't forget, if you like this content, subscribe, smash that like button, turn on the notification bell so you don't miss my next videos, and I will see you guys in that next upload.